Could we give a huge Odyssey-style round of applause for Miss Audrey Tang?
Hello, world.
Audrey, I'm going to leave this audience with you. I'm going to sit down just, I think, out of your sight, but if you need me, give me a shout. I will be paying attention.
No problem at all.
I have to see this way. I'm sorry. There we go. Hello.
That's exactly right. I see your face for the first time.
Fabulous.
So, yes. All right. So really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to share with you with the next 30 minutes a little bit of my work and also about our presidential hackathon, which is very similar to Odyssey Connect in many ways. And I will also be joining you in April, I think, for the Saturday to Sunday at the actual Odyssey hackathon itself at the conclusion of it. And so really happy to meet you first digitally and then, Planck scale analog fashion as well. And because I haven't got the Mentimeter password, so I threw up something, in as an alternative. So if you can just quickly scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter 205. I hope the QR code is showing up. But if it's not, slido.com and 205. Is the place to ask me questions. What I'll do is that I will very briefly introduce a little bit about my work in the Presidential Hackathon, and then any questions on the Slido platform, if it has the most number of likes, I'll just start answering them in a kind of rapid fashion until we run out of time. So is that okay with you? Can you scan the QR code? Is it going well? Okay. It seems,
a lot of people say yes.
Okay, they were saying yes. And here, indeed, we are already seeing a perfect here. And then please keep the questions coming. So, and I will now switch to my slides. So this is our president, now re-elected freshly for the second term, Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. And she said during her first inauguration speech, something I think is very relevant that says, before we think of democracy as a showdown between opposing values, but with innovation, we can turn democracy into conversation between diverse values. That is to say, whenever there's an emerging technology like 5G, distributed ledger technologies, also known as blockchain, and self-driving vehicles and things like that, there's usually kind of a pull, a tension between economic development or environmental sustainability, or between scientific innovation and social justice and so on. But instead of arbitrating kind of between those different values, our presidential hackathon, which physically takes place here, it is my office actually, the Social Innovation Lab. We tore down the walls. People can walk in from the street and talk to me for 40 minutes at a time and offer their interesting co-creations like these self-driving tricycles that co-create with the market and that finds the best innovation that answers, for example, the market need for this kind of self-driving tricycle to follow people around and serve as kind of hand-free shopping assistance. And every year we run this presidential hackathon, which is open for application, I think, a month from now. And at presidentialhackathon.taiwan.gov.tw, and this is open for international teams as well. And the basic idea is that this hackathon has no monetary prize at all. The idea is that whenever anyone proposes anything, for example, they want to automate using machine learning water leak detection, and they deliver it with 3 months of incubation and co-creation, 5 teams every year receive an award. And the award trophy has no money, but it is a microprojector. And if you turn the microprojector on, it projects Dr. Tsai Ing-wen handing the trophy to you, promising whatever you have done in the past 3 months becomes national policy to be deployed within the next year. And so that is the most binding power we can get for the hackathon, because literally we deliver 5 out of 5 every year for the 3rd year now, all the winners into the national policies. And the great thing in Taiwan is that often these data collaboratives, they're started from the civil society. For example, people measuring their air qualities just by those very cheap, 100 euros devices, because we have in Taiwan broadband as human right. Anywhere in Taiwan, even on the top of the Yushan mountain, 4,000 meters, you have 10 megabits per second, broadband is human right at 15 euros per month, unlimited. And if you don't, it's my hot. And so because of that, people can very easily report air quality to water qualities and so on, forming a global network using distributed ledgers. And so I'm asked to introduce you to just one of those presidential hackathon methodologies to kind of share the tool with you. And I decided to share with you the tool called Polis. Polis is a tool that we use in many hackathons to listen at scale. For example, in the very beginning of self-driving tricycles, and also when Uber entered Taiwan in 2015, there's a lot of different social feelings about this kind of emerging technology. So instead of letting people fight each other in a kind of divisive way, we just all ask them on the Polis platform, which is open source now, and we host it ourselves. The data privacy is no problem. And asking a very simple question, given the open government and citizen data about UberX, what do you feel about it? And we asked that for 3 weeks. And then the ideas start to resonate with one another, and we ratify those best ideas into national regulation. So the UI looks something like this. You will see a sentiment from your fellow citizen, much like Slido, where you can agree or disagree, and much like Slido, there is no reply button. So there is nowhere for troll to grow. But unlike Mentimeter or Slido, there is this k-means clustering and principal component analysis map that shows you where your friends and family stand on this issue and whether they share the same feeling as you. And after you click agree or disagree, your avatar will move toward the people who feel similarly to you. And then the system automatically gets the most orthogonal dimensions so that people can keep visualizing the main divisions in their arguments. But because there's no reply, you cannot attack each other. And so people, after clicking agree or disagree for a few times, they will be prompted to offer something else for other people to vote on. And always after 3 weeks, we see this shape. And this shape is the most important because the divisive statements are just 5. But the consensus statements, people actually agree most of the time with most of their neighbors. And all we do is hold ourselves to account and take the top 3 consensus or top 10 consensus, like about insurance, registration, and things like that, and just do a face-to-face deliberation with all the stakeholders and turn that into regulation. So even though social media or institutional media may actually see the world in a kind of divisive way, actually, if you design the interaction just right, then you can see that people actually converge on shared values and building common values out of different positions. I think is truly a civic hacker spirit. And if you're working toward the Sustainable Development Goals, I see my own role in the SDGs as the 17th, which is using reliable data like those collected by Polis to build effective partnership across stakeholders and offer the co-creation as open innovation. And so that's my 5 minutes pitch. And I will now switch to Slido and see what you have to ask me. And please keep the questions coming because I see already a lot of questions here. So 12 questions actually. So one question asks, when will the next presidential hackathon in Taiwan take place? This is actually, if you Google for presidential hackathon Taiwan, everything is here, and it's also in English if you click English. And so currently we're in a kind of wishing pool sense where people just start proposing whatever they feel as important in the 17 SDGs. And that will go for a while. And then after that, we will have the online application and submission. And so if you can spend some time in Taiwan, this is the online application submission period. And if you want to spend only 1 week in Taiwan, you can click international track where there's a different application process. And so it's all on the website. And because of that, I will not say more about it. You can easily see on the Presidential Hackathon website. So 5 people would like to know what is the most pressing matter in my field in Taiwan right now. This is a great question. So actually, we just had a presidential election. And this is the first presidential election where the disinformation crisis did not sow discord in our society as much as in our other previous elections. And so we overcome this information crisis by offering clarifications within hours, so within 2 hours actually. So any ministerial disinformation, rumors and things like that, the prime minister and the minister actually goes out and take a kind of mimetic picture of themselves, offering a funny clarification, and then that goes viral. And then because if you share something about something that you care, that can go from the anger to outrage which is more about social division, or from anger to humor, which is more about converging and rational discussion. And so basically we discovered that if we respond quickly enough with memes, with like literally internet memes, professional comedians, then actually it diffuses a lot of outrage, and we can then show people from this polis interface that people actually care about more or less the same thing, whether they support President candidate Han or President candidate Tsai. Everybody caring about the deepening of democracy and broadening our international relationships. And so that is the first time that the sowers of discord did not succeed in sow discord during the Taiwan elections session. And that's something that I would love also to share with you in the face-to-face connection that we're going to make in April. So 10 people would like to know, what did the first DLT initiative bring Taiwan that couldn't be brought by conventional techniques? I'm glad you asked. So you saw the air map, right? The airbox map. That is actually backed by a DLT. I think it was prototype in IOTA, and so not quite blockchain, you know, a cyclic graph. But anyway, distributed ledger. And the point here is that the people who join are mostly, you know, primary school teachers offering their schools, or people just sharing their balconies and things like that through NB-IoT or through Wi-Fi and collecting PM 2.5, you know, values. And then after sharing it on the ledger and offering this immutability as a promise, they can form an effective data coalition that bargains with the government, because the government only have 700 or so measuring stations, and people have thousands. And so actually people tend to believe each other more than they believe the central government. And so they're in a very good negotiation position vis-a-vis our environment minister. And they did exactly that 4 years ago, saying we would allow you to join our distributed ledger, but only if you promise that we can install airboxes in the industrial areas, the industrial parks that are private property and we cannot enter. And so the government has to actually first agree on the social sector data governance principles, and then together pressure the industrial parks so that it turns out we own the lamp in the industrial parks. And so we install the airboxes according to their design and joining their network in the civil IoT network. And you can read all about it in ci.taiwan.gov.tw. And so the great thing about this design is that the government is supporting but not owning the data collaborative. And because of distributed ledgers, there's no way for example, change the numbers the day before election. And so that become a really good legitimacy building device for all the sectors involved. And in fact, is one of the first working methodologies for the social sector to bargain effectively with the private and the public sector when it comes to data governance, like invention of data unions, right? And so because of that, they're now applying the same to water boxes and things like that. 14 people would like to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would I rate our ability to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030? I think it's definitely 11. So we have more than the capability required to meet all the goals. The thing is that if we work in partnership, we reinforce our efforts. But if we work in silos, in isolation, then some of our externalities of us solving some goals will actually hinder the work that people are solving other goals about. And so, and there are some very wide goals like climate action and things like that, that simply could not happen without partnership for the goals. And so because of that, I think our capacity added together is far beyond what is needed to meet the goals, but it's just currently canceling each other out a lot. And that is where the civic hacker spirit can come into play, by showing people that we really don't have to squander a lot of externalities, but rather can feed into each other's work based on the mutual trust that is offered by distributed ledgers and related technologies. 16 people would like to ask, have I applied POLIS in local government too? That's a great question. Yes, so the picture I show you was actually from Bowling Green, Kentucky, USA. So they did a virtual town hall using that technology. Also, it has been used in a diplomatic setting as well. We run 4 POLIS discussions across the US in Taiwan de facto embassy, the AIT, to talk about how the Taiwanese people and the American people can further, showing Taiwan's uniqueness in the world on human rights, marriage equality, and things like that, and also on economy, security cooperation, and people-to-people ties. And so actually, after each 3-week conversation, we get the ambassadors and section chiefs and so on of all the relevant agencies agents sitting down together in a live stream fashion, committing ourselves to talk only about the 10 rough consensus that is formed. And one of the first digital dialogue this way, if you Google for digital dialogue AIT, you will see all of it. The digital dialogue consensus is that the US should start sending people to the presidential hackathon, and they did, and working on sustainable material management, also known as circular economy in Europe. And so I think it works both in a local government setting as well as in a diplomatic setting. 15 people now would like to know, how would people react to digital identity? Great question. I think a lot of identity systems need to build their legitimacies around one or more different sectors. For example, some countries build around banks, and that's private sector. Some people build around the public sector, the government only the national EID. But very few large organizations build digital identities based on social sector promises. And as my other head hat is a board member of Radical Exchange with Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil and friends, we're working on the idea of intersectional identity, which is not forfeiting the private sector and the public sector identity systems, but rather making sure that we can also build social sector identity systems that work in an intersectional way. Because, for example, if I check in on Foursquare, there's nobody remembering Foursquare now, checking on any social media system and showing a picture of me with two other people, this is actually relational data, and individually our identity is shared with whichever platform that I upload to, and I compromise kind of the negotiation power of the other two people because their data gets uploaded in a kind of shared intersectional identity. And so this kind of data collision that I shared with air boxes and also with water boxes, where the agri people, the farmers, and the plants, industrial plants that operates near the farmland pathways, all join this distributed ledger water box system to report water pollutions into the shared governance system, actually will increase their collective bargaining power. And that builds a shared, more social kind of digital identity that people feel invested in, kind of a stake in it. And so I think this kind of group and community identity can really complement the more individualistic fashion, because if you view it only in an individualistic fashion, then of course the private sector and the public sector will have more bargaining power than the social sector and social innovators. So 19 people would like to know which challenge has had my main interest at the Odyssey Hackathon. So I'm interested in enabling unlikely partnerships. We give out every year an award called the Asia Pacific Social Innovation Partnership Award. And we give it not to a company or to a NGO or to a city government. We give it to designs that involve previously unlikely to collaborate together units, and that's nevertheless collaborated together. For example, Carrefour, which is a chain store here, I'm sure that you have it in Europe as well, it's French, and worked with the animal rights people here in the Animal Rights Advocacy Foundation. And it's very unlikely that they can work on anything else than free-range eggs, but actually they work on a variety of immersive experiences that really makes the animal welfare kind of visible and tangible within the room of Carrefour. And then this kind of social innovation partnerships enable not only Carrefour to build its kind of social responsibility, but actually diverts a lot of the funds to people who normally spend on cheap eggs and things like that, and change their mindset as they consume. And if they consume more than NT $5 million or so every year towards such sustainable goals, I personally give out and give an award to honor this kind of partnership. And so the more unlikely those sectors to collaborate, I think more valuable it is for reliable data to link them together. And that is what my main interest is. And we have the international track in previous years, presidential hackathon. The two international winners, one from Honduras, is working to empower the local environmental activists to implement ecological footprint planning in the beginning of planning process, not until the procurement and development process. And people in Malaysia also work on machine learning algorithms to declare that they can detect cartels now, people who bid together in a kind of anti-corruption effort, but again, with citizen oversight. So again, I think anything that involves social sector participation is my main interest looking at the Odyssey Hackathon. 21 people would like to know, quote, Here in Europe, we don't necessarily hear much of the perspective from Asia. It is something that I see as very different that we could know and learn from. So I think the idea of broadband as human right, when I visited, say, Germany, is not currently seen as kind of their very high, very top priority. In Taiwan, we have broadband as human right. So more than 98% of the indigenous places, of the rural places, of the highest mountains are covered in 10 megabits per second or more bandwidth. And that enables us to bring the government technology to the people rather than asking people to travel to Taipei, our capital city, or enter some participation website online. We actually go to places. So every other Tuesday or so, I just go to the most rural and indigenous and offshore island places and listen what they have to say and what their social innovations are. But we bring the 5 municipalities through Zoom, actually, into this kind of room where we use large projectors to connect different rooms together so that the section chiefs across 12 ministries can answer in real time of the agenda set by the local people. So for example, in the Orchid Island, which is the offshore island, people keep saying their local nurse keep wanting to leave and they don't stay for long because they don't learn much there, because people who have serious injuries or sickness, they always fly through helicopters to the main Taiwan island to treat them so they don't feel that they're trusted by the local people. And after one helicopter crash, which is very tragic, people there said, what if we can change our laws so that through telediagnostics, a specialty doctor and the helicopter dispatch center and the local nurse can work together so the nurse can treat the patient based on the expert doctor's instructions, so that first, we don't have to fly helicopters at night, but second, the families watching this video conferencing telediagnosis can actually learn something, and the nurse will then be able to stay more because they can trust it more. And because they won the presidential hackathon, one of the 5 winners, this is now applying not only to Ireland, but more than 100 indigenous nations and remote islands across Taiwan, and we changed the telemedicine law because, well, they won the presidential hackathon, and the president agreed to do everything it takes, regulation, personnel, or budget to make their idea happen. So this idea of bringing tech to people, bringing decision to where people are, and amplifying face-to-face deliberation rather than replacing face-to-face deliberation, I think that is one powerful idea, but it is only implementable only if you have broadband as human rights. 21 people would like to know, what recent technology or social development am I most excited about right now? So I'm a little bit biased because in presidential hackathon, we're trying out a lot of new mechanisms, for example, quadratic voting. I forgot to mention when I introduced the presidential hackathon that the top 20 is actually voted in by people. And they're voted in from a selection of more than 100 teams by people spending 99 points. And everybody in their national participation platform are joined the gov.tw, of which there's 10 million users out of 23 million people in Taiwan, so about half of the population have an account there. Everybody gets 99 points as tokens to vote. Now, of 100 or so projects, they maybe get mobilized to vote on one, and if they vote 1 vote, that's 1 point. 2 votes, 4 points in total. 3 votes will cost 9 points in total. 4 will cost 16. So the idea is that the marginal cost is the same as marginal return for each increasing cost of the votes. And so you cannot vote 10 votes because you only have 99 points. So people vote 9 votes on their favorite pet subject, and then they still have 18 left. So they look around and learn something more about some other sustainable development goal, and then they vote some more. And they vote 4 votes, which cost 16, and they still have 2 left. And they have to, they don't want to squander the votes. So anyway, they will look to more projects and discover, hey, these 2 have synergies. So maybe we do a 7 and 7, which is 49 points and so on. And so this kind of careful balancing really changes the way that people look at social preferences. Previously, if you do 1 person 1 vote or 1 person n votes, actually half of people feel that they lose after the top 20 is announced because people always over-concentrate their votes on only 1 or 2 of the project. But now, because of quadratic voting, people have the most incentive to express their true preferences without gaming the voting system. And when the top 20 gets announced, more than 90% of people have voted at least 1 point on one of the winning teams. So everybody feel that they have won. And so this idea of quadratic voting and the related idea called quadratic funding, I think is also a very useful ideas that I'm very excited. If you want to learn more, search for quadratic voting. 16 people would like to know, what am I thinking about right now that are the biggest challenges to hinder our cities to become smarter? So that's another Asia thing. We don't say smart cities, we say smart citizens. So the idea is that a smart city is only smart as its citizens. And so if our cities is over smart by making the citizens transparent to the city, but not the city transparent to the citizens, it may sound smart like the city with a lot of CCTV or things like that, which is far more in Asia than in your corner of the world. However, what we're trying to do when we say transparency here is that we're making the state transparent to the citizens. And so I think the biggest challenge is just on this mixed metaphor. If you keep thinking about smart cities instead of smart citizens, if you keep thinking about Internet of Things instead of Internet of Beings, actually that is the main hindrance, because then people will work much closer to machines than to people, and that will make social innovation difficult. Actually, this is a good time to read you my job description, because 4 years ago, when I become digital minister, the HR people asked me, hey, minister, this is the first time that Taiwan has a digital minister. What are you going to do? What's your job description? I'm like, oh, 1 year ago, the UN just passed the sustainable goals. So let's pick 3 of them. My work is 1718, 1717, and 176. And they're like, minister, nobody memorized those SDGs. So you have to write something to explain. So I translated that to kind of poem, and that is literally my job description, which I'll read it to you now. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it the Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that the singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. Well, thank you very much for your great questions. I wonder if there are certain people in the audience that do not have Slido access or prefer to ask by voice. I'm told by the MC that if you want, you can raise your hand. We can open for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience in the analog fashion.
Firstly, can I just say, wow, I made so many notes during that. It feels very awkward for me to stand with my back to the people here, but
no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Obviously, I want to talk to you.
I can fill it in. Yeah.
Is there a burning question? I've got the catch box. Is there a burning question in the room that didn't get to the top of the list? Because of course it is a weighted list. So maybe somebody had a really fresh question that just didn't get the popular vote. This is the one time nobody dares. I see one all the way at the back, so ladies and gentlemen, heads up, I'm going to throw the catch box. It's coming your way. Not my first rodeo.
Hi there. My question is what your work with Vitalik Buterin and all the other people involves. So, I mean, what's your sort of second hat, and what's your role in wearing that?
Yes. So thank you for the question. It's really good question. And so my second hat is, as I mentioned, in Radical Exchange. And I'll just share with you that website. And in Radical Exchange, now switching hats, in Radical Exchange, our role is to work with people all around the world to try out this very simple idea of what we call participatory mechanism design. And the idea through quadratic voting, through quadratic funding, through this kind of data coalitions or data unions and things like that, these are all novel mechanisms that make sure that people automatically do the right thing that maximizes public benefits. And this sounds magic, but it's really not. For example, if you have a cake to share with me, we have a cake to share together. I prefer some part of it, maybe with chocolate or ice cream or whatever, and you prefer other parts of it. And actually, if we fight over it, then the cake degrades. But if we flip a coin randomly and someone cuts and the other one chooses, that is a simple mechanism right there. And we want to encourage all the artists and all the social innovators and all the policymakers to keep thinking instead of in kind of we need a concentrated state power or we need a concentrated kind of capitalistic order to make more fair distributions. We can instead design mechanisms such that people express their social preferences together, like with quadratic voting and quadratic funding. So as a board member, we meet every quarter through Zoom, and we make our own board votes by proposing ideas and vote negatively or positively using quadratic voting ourselves. So if you're interested, you can Google for radical exchange political economy or political, I think political economy. And my work is to take whatever has worked in the, for example, Ethereum community through the Gitcoin experiment. When we have something that works and works well, I just transfer it to, for example, the presidential hackathon and apply the mechanism that's prototyped in the digital world into real world politics. And so that is kind of my projection role from the digital world into the analog.
Was that an answer to your question?
Definitely.
He's looking very, very happy. Thank you so much. Just for your reference, I was making some notes. I thought one of the most magical words or best words used was automagically. That's a word I haven't heard in a long time. Your optimism of 11 out of 10 for solving the SDGs, that's something I can really get behind. Facilitating the unlikely partnerships, thank you so much for doing that. By the way, I still use Foursquare, so maybe that's an Asian thing that it's not happening there anymore. Quadratic voting blew my mind. I was sat with a couple of people here on the front row, and we were just like, that's so obvious. Do we do that here? I mean, I know the terminology, but I don't think I've come across it in a... Nobody's saying we do that. Sorry, GitHub? Yeah, so we basically don't do that over here, so I'm going to go figure that out. And then there was one thing that made me just go, of course. So I'm looking at Rutger from the Odyssey team. He's just out of your sight here. Could we just fix it for the hackathon? It's in a few weeks' time, I know, but changing policies and laws based on the outcome of the hackathon sounds like a really good thing. Could you just call up the Prime Minister and fix it? Rutger says he'll do his best to get that done. Audrey, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I look forward to meeting you when you come over here in April.
Yes,
thank you so much.
I look forward to meet you in person.
Cheers. Bye-bye.